Copy testing. Copy testing is a specialized field of marketing research that determines an advertisement's effectiveness based on consumer responses, feedback, and behavior. Also known as pre-testing, it might address all media channels including television, print, radio, outdoor signage, internet, and social media. Automated copy testing is a specialized type of digital marketing specifically related to digital advertising. This involves using software to deploy copy variations of digital advertisements to a live environment and collecting data from real users. These automated copy tests will generally use a Z-test to determine the statistical significance of results. If a specific ad variation outperforms the baseline in the copy test, to a desired level of statistical significance, this new copy variation should be used by the marketer. Features. In 1982, a consortium of 21 leading advertising agencies, including NWR, Darcy, Gray, McCann Erickson, Needham Harper, and Steers, Ogilvy, and Mather, J. Walter Thompson, and Young and Rubicam, released a public document laying out the PACT, Positioning Advertising Copy Testing, principles that constitute a good copy testing system. PACT states a good copy testing system must meet the following criteria. Types of copy testing measurements. Recall. The predominant copy testing measure of the 1950s and 1960s, Burke's Day After Recall, DAR, was interpreted to measure an ad's ability to break through into the mind of the consumer and register a message from the brand in long-term memory, onomatopoeia. Once this measure was adopted by Procter & Gamble, it became a research staple, onomatopoeia. In the 70s, 80s, and 90s, validation efforts found no link between recall scores and actual sales. Adams and Blair, Blair and Hughes, Blair and Roebuck, Jones and Blair, Masp, Mondello, Stewart. For example, Procter & Gamble reviewed 10 years' worth of split cable tests, 100 total, and found no significant relationship between recall scores and sales. Young, pp. 3-30. In addition, Wharton University's Leonard Lodish conducted an even more extensive review of test market results and also failed to find a relationship between recall and sales. Lodish pages 125-139. The 1970s also saw a re-examination of the breakthrough measure. As a result, an important distinction was made between the attention-getting power of the creative execution and how well branded the ad was. Thus, the separate measures of attention and branding were born. Young, p. 12. Persuasion. In the 1970s and 1980s, after DAR was determined to be a poor predictor of sales, the research industry began to depend on a measure of persuasion as an accurate predictor of sales. This shift was led, in part, by researcher Horace Schwerin, who pointed out, the obvious truth is that a claim can be well remembered but completely unimportant to the prospective buyer of the product. The solution the marketer offers is addressed to the wrong need, onomatopoeia. As with DAR, it was Procter & Gamble's acceptance of the ARS persuasion measure, also known as brand preference, that made it an industry standard. Recall scores were still provided in copy testing reports with the understanding that persuasion was the measure that mattered, onomatopoeia. Harold Ross of Mapes & Ross found that persuasion was a better predictor of sales than recall. Ross, and the predictive validity of ARS persuasion to sales has been reported in several refereed publications. Adams and Blair, Jones and Blair, Masp, Mondello. Diagnostic. The main purpose of diagnostic measures is optimization. Understanding diagnostic measures can help advertisers identify creative opportunities to improve executions. Young, p. 7. Nonverbal. Nonverbal measures were developed in response to the belief that much of a commercial's effects, for example the emotional impact, may be difficult for respondents to put into words or scale on verbal rating statements. In fact, many believe the commercial's effects may be operating below the level of consciousness. Young, p. 7. According to researcher Chuck Young, there is something in the lovely sounds of our favorite music that we cannot verbalize, and it moves us in ways we cannot express. Young, p. 22. In the 1970s, researchers sought to measure these nonverbal measures biologically by tracking brainwave activities as respondents watched commercials. Krugman. Others experimented with galvanic skin response, voice pitch analysis, and eye tracking. Young, p. 22. These efforts were not popularly adopted, in part because of the limitations of the technology as well as the poor cost-effectiveness of what was widely perceived as academic, not actionable research. In the early 1980s, the shift in analytical perspective from thinking of a commercial as the fundamental unit of measurement to be rated in its entirety, to thinking of it as a structured flow of experience, gave rise to experimentation with moment-by-moment systems. The most popular of these was the dial-a-meter response, which required respondents to turn a meter, in degrees, toward one end of a scale or another to reflect their opinion of what was on screen at that moment. More recently, research companies have started to use psychological tests, such as the Stroop effect, to measure the emotional impact of copy. These techniques exploit the notion that viewers do not know why they react to a product, image, or ad in a certain way, or that they reacted at all, because such reactions occur outside of awareness, through changes in networks of thoughts, ideas, and images. Copy testing in political elections. Copy testing is utilized in an array of fields ranging from commercial development to presidential elections. In 2007, CNN employed this form of market testing throughout the primary and general election. Professor Eta Kirk and Dan Schill from Southern Methodist University worked with CNN to gauge voters' reaction to debates between presidential hopefuls. http://www.cnn.com/2011/politics/06/14/dial.testing/index.html. Relevant terms.